Winning Blueprint presents.
In the lab room, the market.
Welcome to the market. You're in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the market, the NFL's one-stop shop for all positions related to the field. I'm your host, Lou, here in the market. It's been a very, very quiet offseason for some in the NFC East, and for others, like the Philadelphia Eagles, it has been absolutely chaos. Free agent frenzy for the Philadelphia Eagles. They have been maybe the most active team in all of the National Football League in free agency. And when you get a new regime and you purge the roster, you turn it over, you get rid of old dead weight, and you bring in new guys, that's exactly what normally happens. You bring in a lot of new guys, a lot of fresh faces. You want your guys in there, so if anything goes wrong, you can say, well, look, I gave it my best shot. I gave it a run with my guys. No one wants to be fired using other people's stuff. So it's a new day in Philadelphia. The Giants are looking to try to rebound after winning the Super Bowl 2 years ago and then not making the playoffs the following season. So they're looking to rebound in the 2013 season. You look at the Redskins, they're coming off of a huge season, winning the division and really having a new direction with Robert Griffin III at quarterback. They've got a little something going, but they've been hindered, so have the Cowboys, by cap penalties levied down by the National Football League. And so they haven't been as active as they normally are this time of year. And so not a lot of noise coming out of either DC or Dallas. However, this is still a very, very busy division. So let's talk about some of the teams in this division. And to do that, I will be using my trusty, handy, dandy big board. In front of you, you see a comprehensive spreadsheet that I've put together listing all the teams in the National Football League. And on this list, among the topics that you'll find are releases. Then you have free agency signees, re-signees. These are the players that you sign back to your roster. And then finally, guys that you lost in free agency. So without any further ado, let's get to the list. And the first team that we'll be talking about is the Dallas Cowboys.
Dallas Cowboys.
And here's a team that is really strapped for cash. And their sanction from the league wasn't as severe, wasn't as stiff as the Redskins, but they've had some bad contracts over the years, some guys that are being paid a lot of money, guys like Miles Austin who have big contracts, a guy like Tony Romo whose contract and deal is coming up and they have to redo him. And so there's a lot of factors out in Dallas, a lot of guys having to restructure. Brandon Carr restructuring his deal. A lot of guys getting in and restructuring their deal. Witten restructuring, DeMarcus Ware restructuring. So the Cowboys looking to try to find ways to make up some cap space so that they can go out and be players in free agency, so they can go out and do a new deal with Tony Romo. And so let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. And so far, they have two releases, Dan Connor and Gerald Sensabaugh. Connor was the guy that was adding depth, adding value at the linebacker position. He really never materialized. He's a guy that is often injured. He wasn't able to come in and really stabilize any position at the linebacker position for the Cowboys. So he was a rotational depth guy. They have a lot more athletic guys that they're looking for in the mix. And they needed him last season as they had a slew of injuries at the linebacker position. So he's gone now. You look at Gerald Sensabaugh. I was really never a big Gerald Sensabaugh fan in Dallas. And he's a guy that they thought was going to come in and shore up their safety position. They've had safety woes. Man, it really goes back to the days of Darren Woodson. I mean, they really haven't had a good safety in Dallas for a long time. And so they're looking for a guy that can come in and really shore up this safety position. And Gerald Sensabaugh wasn't that guy. And he was making some money. They cut him loose. They're going to be looking for some more safety help coming up in this draft. You look at the Cowboys and what they were able to do in free agency. Nothing. Quiet. Crickets. There's nothing to talk about in terms of the Cowboys signing free agents because they don't have a lot of money. And they were up against it coming into the offseason. They had to restructure some deals and let some guys go just to save face, just to get to above water in terms of the cap. And so nothing here to report. No moves made by the Cowboys. You look at guys that they were able to re-sign and only one. Again, I told you the Cowboys, very quiet in free agency thus far. Ernie Sims, they brought back the linebacker that they signed throughout the course of the season last year. Ernie Sims played solid for him. They brought him back. Here's a guy that's going to add more depth to that linebacking corps. Again, they have a lot of linebackers that they already have in the fold, and so I don't know how much time he's going to see on the field, but he's going to be a guy that's going to be in the mix in Dallas at the linebacker position. So they re-signed Ernie Sims, and that's it in terms of re-signees. Now you look at players lost in free agency for the Cowboys. They lost Kevin Ogletree. He went to Tampa Bay. Here's a guy that was in the slot. They were looking for big things from him. And if you watched the first game of the season last year on Thursday Night Football against the New York Giants, the first game of the season, the Cowboys went out and surprised the Giants, won that game on the road in New York, really spoiled their Super Bowl party. Kevin Ogletree was the catalyst for that. And if you were a Cowboys fan, you were thinking, hey, maybe the light bulb has finally come on for this U of A grad. Maybe he's finally starting to get it. But he really never had another big game like that the rest of the season. He never really showed up like he did in that opening game. But there's potential there. There's a lot of talent there. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to take a shot at him. We're going to see what happens, but he's no longer a Dallas Cowboy. You look at Marcus Spears, longtime defensive lineman for you. Played a really integral part in your defensive line being stout. Again, nothing earth-shattering from Marcus Spears. You thought he was going to be a game changer when you drafted him out of LSU. He was just solid, and there's nothing wrong with being solid, but now he's moving on, and he's going to be a Baltimore Raven. You look at another guy that's gone. This one is sort of a really quiet move that I know a lot of Cowboys fans won't really pay much attention to. And with you going out and getting the tight end from Oklahoma like you have, and him starting to really get more of a bigger role in the offense, a guy like John Phillips leaving and heading to San Diego won't impact you as much, but I actually like John Phillips a lot. And I thought until he hurt himself about 2, maybe 3 seasons ago in the preseason, he was really starting to emerge as a very athletic tight end that could get it done for you behind Jason Witten. But then you go out and you get the young man from Oklahoma that you have as your backup tight end right now. He's very athletic. He looks like he's going to be the heir apparent to Jason Witten. And so I guess a guy like John Phillips, he's a guy that becomes expendable. And so I have no problems with you guys letting him go, but he's a really good tight end. And I think if given the opportunity to play a little bit more, could really flourish in the National Football League. And so John Phillips now going to be a San Diego Charger. And that's basically it for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, not a lot to talk about with the Cowboys. And again, when you don't have money, you can't go out and spend money. You can't spend something that you don't have. And again, in the market, cash. Straight cash, homie, in the great words of Randy Moss. Straight cash, homie. No credit in the market. And so if you don't have money, if you don't have the capital, you can't get players. And so the Cowboys are awfully quiet. And you know Jerry Jones loves to go out and get free agents. He loves to be loud and boisterous this time of the year. But when you don't have any green, you can't make any noise. And so we'll see what happens for the Cowboys in the draft and what they are able to do to help this team moving forward. Because this team right now in the NFC East, they're starting to fall to the backdrop. And the talent is starting to dwindle, and they're not resembling the team that was so talented. You saw late in the 2000s that you thought every single year this could be the year the Cowboys could do it. And they're starting to fall to the backdrop of the NFC East, and they need to make some moves to reinvigorate this football team, or else they'll fall behind. The Redskins are starting to take steps to become a better football team. The Giants are consistently good every year. The Eagles are making a slew of moves. We don't know what that means right now, but they're making moves to try to better their franchise. And so we're going to see what the Cowboys do in this upcoming offseason and into the draft to better their football team. But they're not very busy. They're not a big player in free agency thus far. And that's going to do it for the Dallas Cowboys in the market. Stay tuned as we now will be talking about the New York Giants in the NFC East.
New York Giants.
Welcome to the market. We're here with the New York Football Giants. And just a season ago, this time last year, this team was on a emotional high, coming off of a Super Bowl victory. They felt like, hey, why can't we do it again? And so the sky was the limit for the Giants at that time. You fast forward to this year and a year later, and all of a sudden the Giants have some questions to answer. How is our running back situation going to look? Will Victor Cruz be back on our football team? How is our defense going to shape up? Losing guys like Kenny Phillips. What are we going to do along our defensive line? O.C. Umenyiora is gone. We didn't get the production that we were used to getting out of JPP. Justin Tuck wasn't himself. So a lot of questions to answer if you are the Giants. You need to go out and make some moves to solidify your team on both sides of the football. And so let's talk about the New York Giants and what they were able to accomplish thus far in the free agency period and what they've done in the offseason. And we're going to use the help of my handy-dandy big board. And in front of you, you see a comprehensive spreadsheet that I've put together with every team in the National Football League on it, including the Giants. And among the topics on this spreadsheet are releases. Then you have free agent signees, re-signees. These are the guys that you re-sign to your football team. And last but not least, guys lost in free agency. So let's talk about the New York Football Giants and how this team has tried to better their franchise in the 2013 offseason. Guys that they had to let go of, guys that they re-signed, guys that they signed in free agency, and guys that they lost in free agency. So let's talk about the Giants. We start with guys that they had to release. And early on in the offseason, they were one of the first teams to really let some of their veteran players go. Some teams waited. The Giants didn't hesitate. They were the first ones out of the gate to say, hey, you guys are making too much money. We don't think that you're in the prime of your career anymore, and we need that cap space to make some moves in the offseason. You guys have to go. And so the first round of cuts for them were Ahmad Bradshaw. And that was probably the biggest of all their cuts because even though he has a chronic foot problem and he doesn't practice during the week for most weeks of the season, Ahmad Bradshaw comes out and performs on Sundays. And so that one was a surprise to me. I didn't really see that one coming. But again, the emergence of David Wilson kind of spelled the end of the road for Ahmad Bradshaw in New York. Now, he may even be back in New York. The window is still open. The door is still open. The Giants have already talked to him, and he's already said, hey, I won't rule out going back to New York. But in this day and age, veteran running backs find it hard to find work in this league. And so his most value will be in New York with the Giants. I can't see another team going out and saying, hey, we need Ahmad Bradshaw. Now, he can't help another football team. And he's still a relatively young guy. He's not 30 years old. He's not 29. I think he's about 27 or 28 years old. So he still has some football left, does Ahmad Bradshaw. But there are other teams around the league that they'll just go out and get a young guy in the draft or a young guy off of another roster that's on a practice squad before they go out and get a veteran like Ahmad Bradshaw who's dealing with foot issues. And so we'll see what happens with Ahmad Bradshaw, but he's no longer a New York Giant right now. You look at another guy gone in the offseason, Chris Canty. Solid defender for you. Again, not a guy that you're going to lose sleep over losing, but solid on that defensive line. When he was playing really good football, when his defensive line was really getting after the quarterback, he was part of the reason why, because he was an interchangeable part that you could slide inside, slide outside, and still have flexibility and have him be a guy that can get after the quarterback, that can still stop the run and really help you on that defensive line, but he's now gone. Look at another guy that's gone, Michael Boley. And to me, his tenure in New York was marred by injury. If he could ever just stay healthy, I thought that he would really be a really good linebacker for the New York Giants. But he was always injured. But when he played well. And so that's a guy that you probably won't be too sad to see go either because he was never really healthy in New York. So now we look at free agent signees for the Giants, and they got busy. As the week drew on, they got busier and busier and busier, and they racked up a nice amount of players. After you tally up how many guys they've gotten over the course of free agency to this point, you'll see that, hey, the Giants really went out and did some things in free agency. At first, they were relatively quiet, but as free agency wore on, the Giants begun to be more active in free agency. So let's talk about some of the guys that they were able to acquire. Ron Mundy, backup safety in Pittsburgh. You lose Kenny Phillips, and Stevie Brown really played well for you. And so Stevie Brown's going to slide right in, and the Giants like to play different looks on defense. Sometimes they put 3 safeties on the field. You just never know what kind of look you're going to get from the Giants. But if they're going to play a traditional 2-safety look, Ryan Mundy won't start. He's a guy that you're looking for depth with, and you lose one, you got to plug one back in. Stevie Brown was a backup last year that played well in the absence of a guy like Kenny Phillips. And so when Kenny Phillips came back, they went to a 3-safety look because they didn't want to take Stevie Brown off the field. So now if you go back to the traditional 2-safety look, Stevie Brown's going to fill in for Kenny Phillips, who's now gone. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Ryan Mundy will take Stevie Brown's position as that rotational depth guy that in a pinch can start for you. Because as we know, Ryan Mundy had to start for the Steelers last year with Troy Polamalu being on the shelf. So Ryan Mundy is a guy that's going to come in and give you some value at that safety position and play some special teams for you. Look at another guy that you were able to go out and get. You either go home or go home. That's one of my favorite sayings. Go home or go home. And what I mean by that is you can either go home to the team that drafted you, the place that you'll always call home in the National Football League, or you can actually go home, pack your things up, go home, you're no longer in the National Football League. And that's where Aaron Ross was after he was released from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He could either go home or go home. And so it's simple. He left New York looking for a lucrative deal after winning the Super Bowl. He wanted to cash in on that success of the Super Bowl, and he did so. He went to Jacksonville, got paid. New regime comes in. He's expendable. He's a guy that they felt like they were paying too much money for, that wasn't going to produce at the level of that contract. They cut him loose. So now he goes back to New York and he says, hey, can I come back home? And the Giants, being the parents that they are to Aaron Ross, being that they drafted him, said, you know that you're always welcome at home. Come on back, man. And so Aaron Ross is back in New York, where he should have been the whole entire time. I think that he fit what the Giants were doing, and I thought that he wasn't that great of a corner for him to go out and try to spread his wings and become a premier corner on the market. And so he figured out the grass isn't always green on the other side. He's now back in New York, and that's a good thing for both parties involved. You look at another guy that you were able to go out and get in free agency, Josh Brown. You need a field goal kicker. Lawrence Tynes has been solid for you, but last year he was a little inconsistent. And again, in the field goal kicking game in the National Football League, it's what have you done for me lately? You can be like David Akers was for San Francisco in 2011 and be basically the MVP of the team, and then the next year come out and be inconsistent and lose your job. That's how it is in the life of a field goal kicker in the National Football League. No other position can you be the best player on the team one season or be one of the best players on the team in one season and the next year be looking for work. If you're a great outside linebacker and you go out and get 16.5 sacks one season and the next year you only get 5, you're not going to be cut from the roster. They're just going to say he had an off year, he was dealing with injuries, they were double teaming him. He'll be back. But if you're a field goal kicker and you're one of the best players on the team and you make a career high and an NFL record amount of field goals and the next year you're inconsistent, you're looking for work. Same thing with Lawrence Tynes. He's been really consistent for the Giants, but he had an off season. Now the Giants are looking to upgrade. They went out and got Josh Brown, and that's going to be an upgrade for the Giants at the kicker position. You look at another guy that the Giants went out and got in free agency, Louis Murphy. Here's a guy that's going to come in and going to give the Giants another option at receiver. And he's not going to be your number 1. He's not going to be your number 2. I think he's going to be a perfect guy in the slot, or he's going to be the 4th option because, remember, keep in mind, you have Ruben Randall. He emerged towards the end of the season. And so look for Ruben Randall to get more playing time in New York. Louis Murphy, he's coming in to replace a guy like Ramses Barden. I don't think Ramses Barden is going to be back in New York, and you're going to need that depth because, as we know, Hakeem Nicks always injured. And so when he gets hurt, Ruben Randall is going to have to step in at that starter's role. Someone's going to have to be bumped up into that slot. There's Louis Murphy right there when you need him. So like the addition of Louis Murphy to this team, he's solid. He can also give you some value in the returns game if need be. You got Louis Murphy on your football team. Look at another guy that the Giants were able to sign in the 2013 market period. And this guy took an NFL world tour around the league. I swore that this guy was going to visit every single team around the league. It seemed like he was going from team to team, city to city, state to state. And I didn't know where he was going to end up. He was in New York with the Jets. He was in Seattle. He was this. He was there. He was here. He was there. Look, it was becoming impossible to keep up with this guy. It was turning into where in the world is Cullen Jenkins? But he finally landed in New York with the Giants, signing a 3-year contract. And I think he's a very good player, 32 years old, and he became expendable in Philadelphia. Thought he was very productive in his time in Philadelphia. Probably the best member of that quote-unquote dream team that they signed in Philadelphia 2 years ago in the offseason. He's going to come in, really help this Giants defensive line. I like what he's going to bring to the table. You put this guy next to Linval Joseph in the middle of your defensive line, and you have a problem. Other teams have a problem trying to block these two guys, Linval Joseph and now Cullen Jenkins, who will be in the mix. The outside guys, Justin Tuck and JPP, are now going to get one-on-one matchups because these two in the middle are going to be problems. And so there's no excuses now. Justin Tuck and Jason Pierre-Paul need to step up because now Cullen Jenkins is in the middle as well as Linval Joseph. You've got formidable defensive tackles in the middle of your defense. You're going to get one-on-one matchups. You have to win those one-on-one matchups. Cullen Jenkins is now a New York Giant, and that's a very good move for the New York Giants. You look at another guy you were able to go out and get, Dan Connor. Cowboys let him go. You pick him up. You need some depth. You don't know if Chase Blackburn is going to be back or not. You're not sure. In the event that he's not, here's his replacement right here in Dan Connor. And he'll give you some depth. He'll give you some rotational depth, which is what you need. He'll give you some help on special teams. And so another team's trash could be your treasure. Dan Connor, now a New York Giant. You look at another guy you were able to go out and get, Brandon Myers. I think of all your offseason acquisitions, this one right here means the most. You lose Martellus Bennett, who I thought was a huge part of your offense a season ago. You lose him in free agency. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You go and get Brandon Myers. Here's a guy that was ultra productive in Oakland. Now, is he as athletic as Martellus Bennett? No. Will he be a mismatch nightmare for opposing defenses? No. Will he catch the football when you throw it to him? Yes. And that's all you need. Eli Manning is going to give him opportunities to catch the football, and Brandon Myers will catch the football. And that's all you need in New York. A guy that when I throw it to him, he'll catch it. And if it's 3rd and 7 and he runs an 8-yard route, he'll catch it and get the first down and move the sticks. Brandon Myers is going to do that for you. And so you have yourself a tight end in Brandon Myers. Now, looking at the Giants and what they were able to do in terms of re-signing their own, Will Beatty. You needed Will Beatty back. You need to keep your tackles intact. Thought Will Beatty played really solid last year. And in this tackle-rich market this year, a guy like Will Beatty would have been snatched up. And so teams are always looking to upgrade their tackles. And so you got to hold on to your stuff. They held on to Will Beatty. He'll be back for the New York Giants in the 2013 season. You look at Ryan Terrain. Here's the guy that you got in free agency. Essentially, last year, you got him off of the streets. He was with the Redskins. You've seen what he can do. He's a tough runner in between the tackles. Ahmad Bradshaw is gone. You're going to need to fill another void with the running back position. Everyone bumps up a notch. David Wilson goes from backup to starter. Guys like Andre Brown are going to be assuming a different role. He's going to be bumped up in the food chain. That means a guy like Ryan Terrain, who's probably not going to make the roster, all of a sudden now is a guy that you need on your roster. And now he's probably going to see a little bit of playing time as well, especially if guys go down with injury. And we don't know how durable David Wilson is going to be. But if he's not as durable as you think, and we saw Andre Brown go down with an injury last year, a guy like Ryan Terrain can step in and run the football for you. So you re-signed Ryan Terrain. You look at another guy that you re-signed, Keith Rivers. You thought he was something that he wasn't. And you got him from Cincinnati, and you thought maybe, just maybe, we can get that first-round talent out of Keith Rivers. No. He's another Manny Lawson type of player that will never play up to their full potential. And I think you realize that, but you also realize that there's value in Keith Rivers on your football team. He's still athletic. He's still big. He's still a guy that can play the linebacker position. He's a guy that can help you on special teams. Look, you're not going to have all-pro and Pro Bowl players all over your roster. You just need some solid players sometimes. Here's a guy that's going to be solid. He has the potential to be a Pro Bowl player, but you're probably not going to get that out of him. You realize that, and you realize he's a solid option at the linebacker position. Why not? So you re-sign Keith Rivers. You look at another guy that you were able to re-sign, and that's Stevie Brown. You tendered him, and then a lot of times when a guy is tendered and they sign that tender, he's not going anywhere because teams don't want to give up picks to get free agents. I'll just go out and get a guy that I don't have to pay for in terms of draft picks, I can just pay him money. And so teams don't want to give up money and picks for players. So the Giants were smart. They wanted Stevie Brown back. This is a guy that had 7, 8, 9 interceptions last season. You got to find a way to keep that kind of guy in the fold. And so Stevie Brown back with the Giants. I think that was a smart move by the Giants. There was no way they were going to let Kenny Phillips and Stevie Brown walk away. Couldn't do it. And so Stevie Brown will be back with the Giants in the 2013 season. You look at the guys that you lost in free agency, and really not a lot to speak of here. You lost 2 guys in free agency. That's it. You lost Martellus Bennett to the Chicago Bears. And look, you knew Martellus Bennett was going to be looking to get paid. You got some really cheap labor out of him last season, and he really overperformed the amount of money that he was making. And that's fine. That's what you want if you're a team looking to upgrade your roster. You want guys that come in and outperform their contract. But it was a 1-year deal. And so you knew that he was going to look to get paid in free agency. Now, were you trying to pay that kind of money? No. I mean, you don't want to divulge that kind of money to a guy that he was solid for you. He wasn't a world beater. He was really good. But for the kind of money that he got on the market, you need to be great. And so you had to let him walk away. And you would have liked to have had him back. For the kind of money that he got from the Bears, no way you were going to be able to get him back. And so Martellus Bennett has moved on to Chicago. You had to fill that void, and you did fill that void with Brandon Myers from Oakland. So you're okay. You look at another guy you lost in free agency, you wanted him back too, Kenny Phillips. You offered a deal to Kenny Phillips. You said, hey, Kenny, this is what we think that you're worth to us. How about you come back to New York? He looked at the deal. He said, hey, I don't know about that. I think I can get more on the market. He passed it over, ended up landing in Philadelphia. So all of a sudden now, you're still going to see Kenny Phillips, just not in the New York Giants uniform. He's going to be with the Eagles. You're going to see him twice a year, maybe even 3 times if you guys meet in the postseason. So that's going to be bittersweet if you're a Giants fan. Kenny Phillips, a guy that couldn't stay healthy, but when he's on the field, he's a playmaker. He's a guy that can make some things happen for you, and so it hurts. But he's going to be an Eagle, and he's no longer going to be a New York Giant. You basically are going to replace him with Stevie Brown, who played really well for you last year anyway. So looking at the Giants, that's all, folks. I mean, that's basically what the Giants have done in free agency to this point. And again, they've been ultra aggressive. You know, toward the end of the week in free agency and then into the next week, they got aggressive. They started out really slow. They really didn't make a lot of noise. They were trying to get some of their stuff back. They ended up not being able to. They lost Bennett. They lost Kenny Phillips. It's okay. They went out, made some moves, and I feel like the Giants have really done a good job of damage control. Now, the big fish out there is Victor Cruz. You got to have Victor Cruz back. You don't get Victor Cruz back, and everything you've done in free agency to this point is in vain. And so, if you're the Giants, and I don't expect Victor Cruz to go anywhere. I think that the Giants aren't going to lose him because when you tender a guy, again, I just talked about it, you don't want to give up a first-round pick and money for a guy like Victor Cruz, even though you feel like you're getting a first-round pick talent. That's still a steep price to pay. And so you're not going to find a lot of teams around the league that are willing to part ways with a first-round draft choice and have to go out and pay the man the type of money that he's looking for. So I think the Giants are going to be safe on that route. And I've heard that the Giants have offered Victor Cruz a $7 million a year deal. And so if he gets a 5-year contract, they're looking about $35, $36 million. I think Victor Cruz will take that kind of money eventually when he realizes that there's not another team that's going to come calling for his services out there, because the Giants essentially put that poison pill in there with that tender at the first round level, and so he's not going anywhere. And so that's going to do it for the Giants in the market. We're going to now move on to the next team on the list, the Philadelphia Eagles, and by far the most busy team in free agency in the NFC East.
Philadelphia Eagles.
So welcome to the market. We're now talking Philadelphia Eagles football, and this team is going to look drastically different in the 2013 season and beyond. I mean, Chip Kelly has come in and he has made an impact immediately. I'm talking about he's put his stamp on this football team. This looks like Oregon Eagles instead of the Philadelphia Eagles. And they really have come in and he's changed the whole identity of this football team. If you were in a coma in 2012 and you woke up at the start of the 2013 season, you wouldn't know what just happened to the Philadelphia Eagles as you know it. No more Andy Reid. No more Nnamdi Asomugha. No more Cullen Jenkins. No more It just seems like I could go on and on about the guys that will not be there anymore. No more Mike Patterson. I mean, the Eagles have switched it up, and not only have they switched it up, they went out and got a lot of players. No more Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. It's a slew of guys just going elsewhere. And so let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I'm not going to sit here and hold you up. Look, this is my comprehensive spreadsheet that you see in front of you on my big board, and it has every team in the National Football League on it. And going to talk about the Eagles using this spreadsheet, and among the topics on this spreadsheet are releases. You have players signed in free agency. You have re-signees. These are the players that you re-signed to your roster. And then last but not least, players you lost in free agency. So you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is a team that was ultra busy in every front, maybe except re-signing their own players. And again, when you have a new regime, maybe there's not a lot of guys that you value that's on the roster that needs to be re-signed. Maybe you just want guys to walk away. Hey, I want to start this thing over, fresh slate, start over clean. And so you don't re-sign a lot of guys. In their case, they didn't re-sign anybody. We'll get to that a little bit later, though. Let's talk about players released. And again, the Eagles continue to purge this roster. They had already cut guys loose before here, like guys like Jason Babbitt didn't even make it out of the 2012 season. And so the purging begun before the season was even over. You get rid of Andy Reid. You get rid of guys like Mike Patterson. You get rid of guys like Cullen Jenkins. You get rid of guys like Nnamdi Asomugha, and you clean up this roster. And so you get from under some bad contracts, and Cullen Jenkins was a guy that was going to make some money. That he's 32 years old. You feel like he was probably the most productive player that they got out of that dream team offseason. He was probably the most productive, him and Babin. And so you can say, well, he wasn't one of those guys that you wasted money on, but he still was going to make a lot of money. And he's 32 years old. He's getting up there in age. And so that's not the direction that this organization was going in. And so they let him go. You look at another guy that they let go, Mike Patterson. He's a guy that had the heart thing and he had the head thing. Just too many issues with Mike Patterson. He's getting up there in age again. And if you can free up some cap space with an aging veteran, you do that. Mike Patterson is exactly that. He's no longer a Philadelphia Eagle. And you look at the big whopper. And this was the one that everyone thought was coming. Everyone kind of figured was coming. But still, it had to come. Nnamdi Asomugha, no longer a Philadelphia Eagle. Here's the guy that this was probably the biggest free agent blunder by the Philadelphia Eagles in recent memory. I mean, they went out, they spent a ton of money, a boatload of money on this guy, and it just never materialized. And he's a guy that he's really good if you put him in the right system, in the right scheme, but it just seemed like he was never comfortable in Philadelphia. They asked him to do too much instead of having him focus in on one thing like he did in Oakland. Man-to-man, play this guy, don't let him get open. They asked him to play zone. They asked him to play some safety. They asked him to play some man-to-man. They asked too much of Nnamdi Asomugha. He wasn't comfortable, and you can see it. He got himself into some trouble, and teams were beating him left and right. He didn't fit in Philadelphia, and so now he's gone. Now you look at the guys that the Philadelphia Eagles were able to sign in free agency, and this is where the Eagles were extremely busy in this offseason. I think the busiest of any team in the National Football League, and that's saying a lot. Because there's some teams that went out and got some free agents, but nobody like the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's talk about some of these free agents that they were able to acquire. Bradley Fletcher, here's a corner from the St. Louis Rams. Really didn't play in the 2012 season, injured himself. He's a solid corner, really solid. I actually really like Bradley Fletcher. If he can stay healthy, you're going to get a very good corner, and you're not going to spend a lot of money on. And this is a big change from what you did 2 years ago in the offseason when you went out and spent money on Nnamdi Asomugha. You went out and got Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. You already had Asante Samuel on the roster. And so this is going to be a big change from that if Bradley Fletcher can be healthy. So you look at another guy that the Eagles went out and got, Patrick Chung. And here's a guy that Chip Kelly coached at Oregon. And, you know, this is what college coaches do. They go out and they get guys that they coached in college, if they're available, and they bring them in, and they feel like, hey, I can get the most out of this guy. I know what he can bring to the table. This is an instance of that. Patrick Chung played for Chip Kelly at Oregon. Patrick Chung was a free agent. He leaves New England. He comes to Philadelphia. He's going to help the Eagles at the safety position. You look at another guy that the Eagles went out and got, James Casey. Here's a versatile fullback / tight end that played for the Houston Texans a season ago. And I think that Chip Kelly loves his versatility. Here's a guy that he can catch it out of the backfield. He can block. And he can do a lot of things for you. And he's a hybrid. So he's a mismatch for a linebacker or a safety. You can flank him out wide as a tight end, and he can catch the football in that capacity as well. And you can't just say, hey, we're going to allow a linebacker or a safety to check him, because he can beat these guys off the line of scrimmage and win one-on-one matchups. And so you can move him and motion him into the backfield, have him, catch the ball out of the backfield. He just can do a lot for you because he's a guy that's a hybrid, a tight end and a fullback. They like that versatility. Chip Kelly thinks he's going to fit well into his offense. They got James Casey. You look at another guy that they were able to go out and get, Isaac Sopoaga from the San Francisco 49ers. The Philadelphia Eagles are making the switch from a 4-3 defense to a 3-4 defense. And when you're doing that, you need an anchor up front, a guy that's going to be your defensive tackle, that's going to be that immovable object in the middle of your defense. If you don't have a guy that's stout at the point of attack in the middle of your defense, at the nose tackle position, you can forget about playing a 3-4 defense. That's the first piece that you need if you're going to play a 3-4 defense. Now, it always helps to have linebackers, but if you don't have a guy up front, you're going to get gashed in the run game. And so Isaac Sopoaga is going to come in and solidify the middle of this defense for the Philadelphia Eagles. This was a necessity. They went out and got him from the 49ers. This is a huge pickup. Good move by the Philadelphia Eagles. You look at another guy that the Eagles were able to go out and get, Connor Barwin. Here's a guy that was with the Texans, and it seems like the Eagles like shopping at the Houston Texans store. They went and got James Casey from the Texans. Now they got Connor Barwin from the Texans. And Connor Barwin is a guy that he can get you pressure off the edge. He can set the edge in the run game. He's really solid in every facet of the game. And so he's going to come in, play a huge role at outside linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles. You can slide him down at defensive end on certain downs when you want to get a pressure package onto the field. You want to put more athletic guys on the field. You can slide this guy in at defensive end, put some more athleticism and speed on the field, and have this guy be a menace on the defensive line. And so he's very versatile as well. The Eagles paid a pretty penny for him, however. 6 years, $36 million. Don't know if Connor Barwin was worth that type of money, but he's going to be a great addition to this Philadelphia Eagles football team. You look at another guy the Eagles were able to go out and get, Kerry Williams. Again, this whole changing of the guard at the cornerback position. You're going from spending a whole lot of money for not a lot of production to spending a lot less money, and you're hopefully getting a lot more production out of the money that you spend. You're looking to get the best bang for your buck. Here's another guy that's going to help you do that, Kerry Williams. You didn't break the bank for him. 3 years, about $17 million. And so this guy's going to come in, play a solid cornerback for you. He was solid from the Baltimore Ravens, helped them win the Super Bowl, and he's a guy that's physical, isn't afraid to stick his nose in the fray. I call him a very nosy corner. And what I mean by that is he's nosy. It's all in your business. He gets up in receiver's face. He jams them at the line of scrimmage. He's not afraid to go and tackle. He's a guy that's always in the mix. He's very nosy. He wants to know what's going on, and he's not afraid to stick his nose in there and find out what's going on. And so Kerry Williams going to be a physical, good corner for the Eagles on one side, and if you're lucky, Bradley Fletcher will be solid for you on the other, and you won't be spending a lot of money between the two cornerbacks. This is a huge change from a season ago when Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie was on one side and you had Nnamdi Asomugha on the other side, and you were spending a whole heap of money on those two guys. So you look at another guy that you were able to go out and get in free agency, and I told you it was a lot of players that the Eagles went out and got. Kenny Phillips. Here's a safety that you plucked away from the New York Giants. So you weaken one of your division rivals and you strengthen your team at the same time. Now, can you get Kenny Phillips to stay healthy? That's a big question. Can you get Bradley Fletcher to stay healthy? That's the question. These are guys that can be ultra productive when they're playing, but they have to be on the field to be productive. And so Kenny Phillips is the guy that, when healthy, he's dangerous. He makes plays. He's everywhere. But the key is getting him to stay healthy. The Eagles think that they can. They got Kenny Phillips. He's going to upgrade this safety position just like that. Your whole secondary looks different. 2 new starting corners, 2 new starting safeties. The Eagles are going to look totally different on the defensive side of the football. Not to mention, you're switching from a 4-3 to a 3-4, so that's going to look different. You went out and got players to help you make that transition seamlessly, and so the Eagles are going to look totally different on defense and as a team as a whole. So you look at guys that they were able to re-sign, the Eagles have not re-signed a single player, and that kind of speaks volumes to what this new regime thought about the guys that were there already. They didn't feel like they needed to re-sign anyone. Let them walk away. We're going to start with a clean slate. We're going to bring in guys that I feel like are going to be able to get it done. And again, when you're a new head coach, your biggest thing is, I want to get my guys in here. If it doesn't work with my guys, I can live with that. I don't want to be fired because guys from the last regime were left over and they didn't get it done. And so he's purging this roster and he's bringing in guys that can get it done, or at least he feels like can get it done under his scheme. So now you look at guys lost in free agency, and the Eagles don't have a lot of guys here that they lost in free agency. They lost King Dunlap, their tackle last year, and he had to fill in. He was in a tough spot last year. He was solid, but he's not a guy that you really want to start at left tackle. But they didn't have a choice. They were up against it. They lost Jason Peters before the season even started. And so they were really hurting on this offensive line. But King Dunlap can be a solid right tackle for you in this league. And so he signed with San Diego. He's going to be a rotational depth tackle there, maybe even start at right tackle for the San Diego Chargers. If you're the Eagles, you're not really hurting because of this loss. Because this guy was solid, but he wasn't anyone that you had to retain. And so King Dunlap is now a San Diego Charger. You look at another guy that you lost in free agency, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, now gone. He's a Denver Bronco, signed a one-year deal in Denver. And so, again, another guy that maybe you wanted back. But at the end of the day, with the signings that you've made at the cornerback position, you didn't need him back. You still got Brandon Boykins, the corner you drafted out of Georgia a season ago. And so he's going to still play in the slot. You go out and get Bradley Fletcher. You go out and get a guy like Kerry Williams. You've got three corners right there. You don't really need a guy like Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie who is going to want to start. And so you don't have a position on the field for him to start anyway. So this is another guy that you're not going to lose any sleep over losing. And so that's going to do it for the Philadelphia Eagles. Humongous offseason for the Philadelphia Eagles. New coaching staff, new players, out with the old, in with the new. It's a different feel. It's a different vibe. It's a different team in Philadelphia. And so a very busy offseason to really accentuate that. And I tell you what, we're going to see what all these changes mean for the Philadelphia Eagles in the upcoming season. They still have more free agency left, and they have the draft, so we'll see how busy the Eagles continue to be in this offseason. And we'll finish up the NFC East with the Washington Redskins.
Washington Redskins.
So last but not least, in the NFC East, we have the Washington Redskins. And they were in first place. They won the NFC East a season ago. And so that's a huge change for a team that for a while was at the bottom of this division. But you get a new quarterback. You start to get talented players in the fold. You get new management, and they start to change things around. And what do you know? You've got a winner on your hands. Now the Redskins are looking to take that next step. Hard to take that next step when you don't have any money. And the NFL docked them $36 million for a cap penalty that, by many accounts, was not warranted. However, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the fact that last year the Redskins had to give up $18 million. This year the Redskins had to give up $18 million under the cap. And so it's going to be a rough offseason. Has already been a rough offseason for the Washington Redskins because when you don't have money, you can't upgrade your roster the way you want to. And the Redskins were looking to take that next step. Maybe go get a right tackle. Maybe go get a safety or two. Maybe go get a cornerback or two. Instead, you got to settle for getting your stuff back. And look, if you don't have any money to sign guys out on the market, that's one thing. But you always got to find a way to scrounge up some money to re-sign your guys. Keep your stuff in-house. And the Redskins at least were able to do that. And you'll see that when we get to the re-signees column for the Washington Redskins. But let's talk about the Redskins. And first, I want to show you my big board. And on it is a comprehensive spreadsheet that has every team in the National Football League listed on it. And among the topics that you'll find on this spreadsheet are releases. Then you have players signed in free agency, re-signees. These are the players that re-sign with their team. And then last but not least, players lost in free agency. So you look at the Washington Redskins, and this was quite a change for the Redskins because this is a team that is very active in free agency. They love to go out and upgrade their roster, and they've done a really good job of doing that over the last 2 or 3 seasons since Mike Shanahan and Bruce Allen have come in and taken over this organization and the front office management. They've done a really good job of going out and getting free agents that really help them, and they don't overspend for guys. A lot of people were really wary of the Pierre Garçon move a season ago. They thought that they overpaid for Pierre Garçon. There's no such thing as overpaying for a guy that's a #1 receiver. You can't overpay for a great defensive end. You can't overpay for a franchise QB. And you can't overpay for a #1 wide receiver in this league. You don't know what that guy is worth to a team. And if this guy comes in and he produces, and Pierre Garçon produced for the Redskins when he was healthy last year, then he's worth all the money that you gave him. And so the Redskins have done a great job in free agency, but they're really handicapped this year by that $18 million penalty sanctioned down by the National Football League. And so you look at what they were able to do in the release department. They had to release D'Angelo Hall. He was slated to make close to $8 million. They needed that money to get under the cap, and he didn't want to restructure. They had to let D'Angelo Hall go. And the bad part about this is, for both parties, the Redskins don't have a lot of cornerback help. And D'Angelo Hall started to play better football toward the end of the season. But if you're D'Angelo Hall, with the corner market being oversaturated, are you really going to find a lot of money coming your way? And so he's going to have to wait till the market settles down. And once it settles down, all the money would have been dried up by then. And so I don't know if it was very smart on the part of D'Angelo Hall not to redo his deal. And so I don't know if that was an option that was on the table or if they just flat out released him and did not consult with him and ask him to take a pay cut. And so I don't know how that unfolded, but D'Angelo Hall no longer a Washington Redskin. You look at the free agent acquisition column for the Washington Redskins, and when you don't have money and you're penny pinching, you got to go out and find value deals. And that's what the Redskins did. They bypassed all the high-priced merchandise at the front of the market. They went straight to the back, to the pink tags, and went and found guys like Tony Pashos, who did not play football in the 2012 season. He last played in the 2011 season for the Cleveland Browns. Dealt with a foot injury, needed surgery for it, sat out the 2012 season. It's now going to be back in the fold, and he's going to be in Washington as a tackle. And so the Redskins went out and got a guy on the cheap in Tony Pashos at the tackle position. You look at another guy that they went and got at the tackle position, Jeremy Trueblood. Here's a guy that struggled in Tampa Bay at times at the tackle position. Again, you have a guy like Bruce Allen who drafted him, knows what Jeremy Trueblood can bring to the table. So he's in the fold in Washington. And again, the Redskins have a glaring need at right tackle. Now, if they bring back Tyler Columbus, which they did, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, you still have a competition at right tackle. Just because Tyler Columbus comes back doesn't mean he's going to be guaranteed that right tackle position. He was inconsistent. He had his good moments. He had his bad moments. I thought he played really well at the end of the season, and so I think that it's Tyler Columbus's job to lose, but he's going to have some competition in the form of Tony Pashos, Jeremy Trueblood, and some other guys that the Redskins have on their roster currently. So you look at another guy that the Redskins were able to get, and they found some money to sign a guy like E.J. Biggers, the cornerback from Tampa Bay. You see the theme here. Bruce Allen, ex-Tampa Bay GM. Jeremy Trueblood, E.J. Biggers, ex-Tampa Bay Buccaneer players. The Redskins going out and getting players from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, players that the general manager is comfortable with, that he drafted, that he feels like can come in and help this football team. E.J. Biggers coming off of his best season as a professional last season in the 2012 campaign is going to come over and try to help the Redskins out at the cornerback position. So you look at all the re-signees for the Washington Redskins, and they had a slew of them. And again, when you can't go out and sign free agents from other teams, you best take care of your stuff in-house, and that's what the Redskins were able to do. Let's talk about some of their re-signings. Kedrick Golston, a guy that is a depth guy on your defensive line. He's a rotational depth guy that in a pinch can start for you. He's solid, sometimes can be moved off of his spot in terms of being stout at the point of attack in the run game, but he's a solid defensive end, and when you're looking to not spend a lot of money, it's best that you keep a guy like Kedrick Golston on your roster and give you that depth that you need along the defensive line. If it's not broke, don't fix it. The Redskins were really good at stopping the run last season, and he was part of the reason why. And so if it's not broken, do not try and fix it. You look at another guy the Redskins went out and re-signed, Sav Rocca, their punter. He's getting up there in age. Sav Rocca is 38, 39, 40 years old, and he will be somewhere around there when the season starts next year. But he's a solid kicker. He's an Australian rugby-type kicker that is tough. He's hard-nosed, not afraid to stick his nose in there and make a tackle. He's not athletic, so he's not going to run anyone down, but he's not afraid to grab a face mask or do whatever it takes to get a guy out of bounds. And as a fan, you love that about a kicker who's not afraid to get in there and try to make something happen. And he can kick the football. So he's going to be back with the Redskins. You look at another guy, Corey Lichtensteiger. I think he's one of the linchpins of this offensive line. He's a guy that the Redskins struggled with out in the 2011 season. And when he came back in 2012 and was able to play for the majority of the season, you saw how good this Redskins offensive line was able to be. And so Corey Lichtensteiger was a must to have back. He's going to be back in Washington, and that's a good sign for the Washington Redskins. If you're a fan, you love this move. Corey Lichtensteiger is one of your better offensive linemen along with Trent Williams. You look at another guy that was able to be re-signed, Darrell Young. Here's a fullback that I think the sky's the limit for. This is a guy that he can catch the football out of the backfield. You can hand it to him as a running back, toss him a bone every now and again and give him a couple of carries. This guy is ultra productive out of the backfield for the Washington Redskins, and I think he can be even more productive if they find ways to get him the football even more. I like this guy in space. Darrell Young is a very, very good blocker in the run game. Opened up some mammoth holes for the Redskins rushing attack with Alfred Morris and Robert Griffin III. And so Darrell Young was an integral part of the Redskins being one of the best rushing teams in the National Football League a season ago, being the #1 rushing team in the league a season ago. Darrell Young was a huge part of that, and he's going to be back in Washington in the 2013 season and beyond. You look at another guy the Redskins were able to go out and re-sign, Rob Jackson. This one is kind of bittersweet. You re-sign Rob Jackson to a one-year deal because you want to see what he can do in this defense when Brian Orakpo comes back. Can he still make plays? How are they going to get Rob Jackson on the field? Then you also find out he's been suspended for 4 games. So that's kind of a tough situation for the Redskins. But with Orakpo being back, that's going to soften the blow of him missing the first 4 games of the season. If Orakpo comes back and he's healthy, Rob Jackson will be allowed to miss those 4 games and won't be as big of a void as it would be if Orakpo was not healthy. So Rob Jackson going to be back. He's back on a one-year deal. We'll see what Rob Jackson does in the 2013 season. You look at another guy back, Logan Paulson. He's a huge part of this Redskins offense. Quietly at the backup tight end position, this guy got it done for the Redskins in a season that they lost Fred Davis for a large chunk of this season. He was the one that stepped in, played really well, blocks his tail off in the run game, can catch the football. He catches everything. And he's a guy that quietly gets behind the defense, makes plays. Logan Paulson, a huge piece of this Redskins offense. He's going to be back, and I think this was a huge signing for the Washington Redskins, especially because you don't have Fred Davis back. And so with Fred Davis possibly signing with another team, Logan Paulson might be your starting tight end in the 2013 season. And so this was a huge re-signing by the Washington Redskins. They get their lumberjack back in Logan Paulson. You look at another guy that the Redskins re-signed, Brian Keel. And with the departure of a guy like Lorenzo Alexander, which we'll talk about a little bit later, a guy like Brian Keel was a must. You need a guy that's going to help you on special teams. This guy is a very good special teams player. You need a guy that can step in and play some linebacker for you in a pinch. He can do that. And so Brian Keel is a guy that's going to play for the Redskins. He played for them a season ago, and he's going to be back in the fold at linebacker for the Washington Redskins. You look at the players that the Redskins lost in free agency, and they've only lost one to this point, but it hurts. And that's Lorenzo Alexander. This guy was the best special teams player in the National Football League last season. He went to the Pro Bowl as a token of the league's appreciation for his ability to play the special teams position. I mean, this guy was a menace and a demon on special teams. And now he's gone. And he was nicknamed the one-man gang in Washington because he played just about every position for the Washington Redskins on the field, on defense, with the exception of the secondary. I mean, this guy was at outside linebacker, at inside linebacker, on the defensive line at one point. And so this guy could do it all, not to mention that he's one of the best, if not the best, special teams player in the National Football League. This is a huge loss for the Washington Redskins. And had the cap penalty not been sanctioned down and levied on the Redskins, this guy would be back in Washington. He was a core Redskin. This one hurts. He's now in Arizona. And so Redskins fans are lamenting the loss, but at the end of the day, you have to do what you have to do. He had to take that contract in Arizona. It was more money, and you can't leave money on the table when you're a guy like Lorenzo Alexander that is never going to really break the bank in his career. You got to get the money when it's there, and he had to move on. And so that's it for the Redskins. That's it for the NFC East. If you look at this division as a whole, it's easy. The Eagles were the best team in the offseason in terms of the moves that they made to better their franchise. It's not even close. The Eagles went out, they spent money, they went out and got a slew of guys, they cut some bad contracts out of their mix, and so the Eagles have done the most to better their team. Up next would be the Giants. Then after that, I would say the Redskins have done some things that really helped them because they re-signed guys. And just like the Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC, I think the NFC version of the Cincinnati Bengals is the Redskins, re-signing your own guys, not really spending a lot of money in free agency, but going out and signing your guys back to your team. The Redskins have done that, and so the Cowboys really haven't done anything in free agency. They've been quiet on all fronts, haven't really released that many guys, haven't really signed that many guys in free agency, haven't re-signed many guys in free agency, and so the Cowboys have been awfully quiet in free agency, but just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're not making moves in free agency, doesn't mean you're not bettering your roster and franchise. And so that's going to do it for the NFC East thus far in free agency in the market.
The market.